Greg was furious today because they didn't allow any amendments to the Farm Bill, and he was going to put it on the Farm Bill. And he got up there and he said his argument, small argument, was farmers need firefighters too, to make it sound germane to that.
Madam President, I yield myself 3.5 minutes. Madam President, I would urge my colleagues to vote no on the Daschle-Kennedy amendment. This is an amendment which, for the first time in history, over 200 and some odd years in our nation's history, we had the federal government trying to pass a law dealing with collective bargaining for cities and counties and states for fire, police, sheriffs, emergency personnel. We've never done it before, and we shouldn't do it now. That is and should be a prerogative of the states. If you read the Constitution, the 10th Amendment of the Constitution says all other rights and powers are reserved to the states and to the people. It didn't say, oh, well, wait a minute, states, you've been doing this for all these years, but now let's have a federal government pass a collective bargaining law that also says you should have remedies, arbitration, and so on. Why is the federal government doing that when the states should be doing it? The states are doing it. Why should we tell the states they're not doing it good enough? We're going to have a bureaucrat go in and review the state's laws and say, well, maybe your state doesn't comply. And some people have estimated 26 or 30 some of the states don't comply. So maybe the state of Missouri is going to have to rewrite its collective bargaining law. Or the state of Oklahoma, or frankly, over half the states have local option, where the state legislature said, we'll leave that up to the cities. Now the federal government's going to say, no, that's not good enough. We're going to have the federal government come in and make that prerogative, make that decision. This bill says, well, we're going to exempt small communities. Communities that have less than 5,000 won't be covered by this law. Well, if we don't get closer, we're going to have an amendment, because I'm going to raise that number. I think 5,000 is way too small. He said, well, we'll exempt those cities that have less than 25 employees. I think that's too small. We're going to have a bigger exemption. Oh, the legislation forgot to exempt volunteers. Why should we cover volunteers? So we'll have to have an amendment dealing with volunteers. There's over 800,000 volunteer firefighters and police officers in the country. Why should we mandate that people have to contribute to an organization against their will? So we need to have voluntary contributions. Madam President, this bill, it is a bill, it is legislation on an appropriation bill. It should be dealt with separately. It doesn't belong on this appropriation bill. Let me just read a couple of comments from a couple of organizations. The United States Conference of Mayors, and I've already inserted these into the record. It says, however, the federal government should not impose collective bargaining procedures and practices on those local governments that have chosen over time to develop alternative methods for the management of human resource and personnel needs. The National Volunteer Fire Council, which represents over 800,000 members of Americans' volunteer fire and EMS and rescue services, says, on behalf of our membership, I urge you to oppose the Daschle Amendment as currently written that would insert the language of this bill on the appropriation bill. The National League of Cities. The National League of Cities believes that the federal government should not undermine municipal autonomy with respect to making fundamental employment decisions by mandating specific working conditions. And then by the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. This letter was written to Senator Jeffers.
The senator has used 3.5 minutes.
Madam President, I yield myself an additional 45 seconds. The Vermont League of Cities strongly urge you to oppose the amendment now pending. The amendment would create a federal collective bargaining law that applies to state and local government employees. We believe strongly this is an issue better dealt with in the State House in Montpelier than in Washington. This amendment is not only intrusive, but it has the potential of causing confusion with conflicting and overlapping statutes. They said it very well. The League of Cities said it very well. The mayor said it very well. The National Conference of Legislators said it well. Leave this area of jurisdiction to the states where it has always been, not try and preempt it by a federal statute. I would urge my colleagues to vote no on cloture.